God, I love the Alpha Legion. I don't play them on tabletop. I don't even play the sniper class in Space Marine 2. But when a mysterious hooded character in one of Dan Abnett's Eisenhorn books said the immortal line, "I am Alfarius," I audibly said hell yeah loud enough to make people look at me on the bus. And yet, there are a lot of Alpha Legion stories that are just mediocre. Too often they just show up as a standard Chaos Space Marine antagonist. I'm going to open a portal and become a demon prince, unlimited power, so on. When you played Dawn of War back in the day, did you even clock that the antagonist was a Chaos Lord of the Alpha Legion? Did he do anything to show that he was from the 20th? Any subterfuge? Any plans within plans? No, he turned up, did something with a MacGuffin that probably involved the portal, and then probably died while going, no. It was generic Space Marine antagonist stuff. But the Alpha Legion are the least generic Chaos Legion there is, to the point that they may not be a Chaos Legion at all, but the longest long con there has ever been, the deepest deep cover operation that could possibly be imagined, and what they might be doing is possibly the only thing in the 40k universe that could be conceivably called heroic. Okay, let's go from the start. The Alpha Legion were the last Legion to be created, the 20th. They were part of a subset of legions, along with the Space Wolves and Salamanders, who were just created to be different. And we know what was done with the Space Wolves. They got literal dog DNA and became heckin' swell puppers. The Salamanders, I think, got their heat-resistant skin. And we don't know exactly what happened with the Alpha Legion, but there's a few possibilities. In The Serpent Beneath, an Alpha Legionnaire gets a tiny amount of their double Primarch Omegon's blood, and suddenly has all of his memories. Now, this isn't something that other Marines are completely unable to do, but they typically require a lot more blood, or like an entire brain, to absorb someone's memories. And the other possibility is more recent. In the most recent Chaos Space Marine Codex, 10th edition, the detachment representing the Alpha Legion, the Deceptors, dumb name, has a special ability called Soul Transference. Special characters can gain each other's abilities, so a Master of Executions could suddenly start flinging around spells like a Chaos Sorcerer. That ability would make sense to be innate to the Alpha Legion on a kind of gene seed level, but the way the different detachment abilities work means that any Chaos Legion could have that ability. I mean, it probably wouldn't be like lore friendly to give it to the Iron Warriors, but you could do it. Or, third possibility, as with so much Alpha Legion related, these two clearly insufficient answers aren't right, and there's a secret third thing that's yet to be revealed. What they did pre-heresy is kind of murky. There were always rumours of a Ghost Legion operated outside of the usual chain of command, taking on the more bespoke work that the other legions were, let's be honest, not smart enough for. These Ghost Marines either didn't wear livery at all or straight up disguised themselves as the other legions, if they even showed themselves. We also don't know when or where they joined up with their Primarch. Friend of the show Mike Brooks' book Alfarius, Head of the Hydra, gives us what is probably the best overview of the Primarch's early life. Unlike the other Primarchs, Alfarius wasn't sent through the warp when he was a baby. The infant Alfarius stayed right where he was on Terra, and his early life goes a long way to explaining the person he would end up becoming. I'm sure that the Emperor was glad that he had at least one Primarch still around, but as always, Father of the Millennium didn't go around showing it. He was barely around during Alf's youth, pouring him off on Malcador the Sigillite. Uncle Malk wasn't any better a father than Big E, and although he did teach the young Alfarius how to hide his mind from other Psykers, he didn't do much to dispel what the boy Primarch must have been feeling. That he was a disappointment, that his father wanted the real Primarchs who were out there in the galaxy, great warriors and generals like he was, not this bookish kid hanging around the palace. Added to all this was Alfarius' sense that something was missing, like he was only half a person. This all became a highly toxic need to prove himself, and eventually his legion, superior to everyone, maybe even including the Emperor. And oh, sorry, I'm just looking through my notes, and none of that actually happened. Sorry. Okay, from the top. Alfarius was scattered through the warp like his brothers, and he landed on the prosperous world of Bar Savor, which was run by a kind of tech oligarchy, like a planetary Silicon Valley. Now, this was the ideal place for someone as smart as ambitious as Alfarius was. But within a decade of his arrival, the alien Sloth arrived. These guys are kind of gross maggot men, big swarms of grubs in a vaguely humanoid shape that can not only devour living beings, but psychically control them. The war against their slave species, the Rangda, killed 80,000 Astartes and millions of ordinary humans over the course of decades, and it's the absolute lowest point of the entire Great Crusade, and possibly led to the deaths of at least one of the lost Primarchs. Alfarius was the only being on Bar Savor strong enough to resist their mind control, but they tried to break him all the same, attempting to turn him into a living weapon to destabilize planets before they could arrive to feed on them. Supposedly, it was the Emperor himself who rescued Alfarius, but he kept him secret from the rest of the Imperium until it was time for him to assume control of his legion. Or hell, maybe Alfarius was the commander of a fleet of warships that tussled with Horus, and Alfarius snuck aboard the Vengeful Spirit, killed all of Horus's bodyguards, and then finally revealed himself to the H-Man. Maybe he was deposited on a dead world and he just wandered around empty ruins and barren wastes completely alone. However he was found, the biggest event in Alf's life, and maybe one of the most pivotal events in 40k's lore, happened on the Dustball planet of Nerf in Dan Abnett's book Legion, the seventh and in my opinion one of the best Horus Heresy books. So Nerf is a desert planet with a population who are kind of chaos adjacent. They can summon armies of lizards, like from geckos to literal dinosaurs. The Imperial army is on the world to force it into compliance, and with them is a guy named John Grammaticus. John, who you'll notice has a completely normal first name and not some sci-fi glup shito bullshit, is an immortal psyker like the Emperor. He has lived for thousands of years when the book opens, but apart from kind of basic telepathy and persuasion, he isn't nearly as psychically gifted as Big E, and is kind of baseline humans in terms of intellect, physical attributes. Now, John is one of several perpetuals, the immortal psychics, who has been recruited by the Cabal, a coalition of powerful aliens. You got the Eldar, possibly a Slann, those little wiggly worms that you have on the end of sticks, Italians, yeah. And I mentioned he's one of several agents just so I can include my favourite 40k fact. It was one of these Cabal agents who shot Martin Luther King. No, Dan Abnett. Bad Dan Abnett. No, you do not do that. So the Cabal have tasked John with setting up a meeting between them and Alfarius. Now that might not sound like the most compelling premise for a book, but any wargamer will tell you how difficult it is to get a group of people in one place at one time. Grammaticus does manage to get Alfarius and the Cabal together, and in doing so, two things happen that totally change everything. The first, kind of on the way there in Alfarius' ship, the Alpha, is that John notices that although all of the Alpha Legion kind of look identical to the untrained eye, to the eye with brains, two of them are more identical than the others. One of them is Alfarius, and the other is Omegon. Alfarius has a twin. Personally commands the elite Efreet stealth squad, but he's in every way identical to his brother, and that's a big deal. Primarchs don't tend to vary that much in combat power. There are some like Horus, Sanguinius, the Lion, who are just kind of a cut above the rest. None of them are strong enough to take on two Primarchs single-handed. Hell, even the Emperor even implies at one point that in a stand-up fight he wouldn't be able to take Alfarius and Omegon. It may be cheating, but Alfarius Omegon instantly is the most powerful Primarch, providing that the Wonder Twins don't split up. That by itself is a big deal, But what the Cabal tells Alpharius and Omegon is huge, and it's kind of still being debated to this day. So the Cabal's psychers are able to see into the future, and they have divined that there are two paths open to humanity. They know that Horus will inevitably betray the Emperor, but if he wins, he's going to be consumed by guilt, going to turn against humanity, wipe out the entire species in a matter of generations. This obviously is going to mean humanity's extinction, but it's going to deprive the Chaos Gods of their biggest source of food, human psychic energy. That's going to weaken them to the point where they really wouldn't be a threat to the remaining sentient species in the galaxy. Now, if Horus loses, then humanity will survive for thousands of years, slowly becoming more decadent, falling apart. Maybe they'll make a bunch of new kinds of space marines with 20 different types of lieutenant, and eventually chaos will win and consume the entire galaxy. Glad that didn't happen. The Cabal brought this information to the Alpha Legion because they alone are smart enough to see the big picture, and I kind of get the sense that they're appealing to Alpharius and Omegon's intellectual vanity. The Cabal want Alpharius to join with Horus, betray the Emperor, and doing so kill literally every human. Now, admittedly, that's a bit of a hard sell. The twins don't go for it. They're 100% committed to the Emperor. John Grammaticus is so shocked by the Cabal's plan, which he didn't know about, to kill off his entire species that he throws himself out of an airlock. He gets better, but, If you read the end of Legion, knowing nothing else, you'll fully expect that the Alpha Legion would stay loyalist. Hell, you'd probably expect them to get onto the Astronomicon the second they're away from the Cabal, tell the Emperor about everything that's going to happen, everything will be fine. Except that's not what happens, is it? The next time we see the Alpha Legion, only a few years after Nerf, they're 100% behind Horus, gleefully slaughtering the loyalists on Isfahan 5. They're responsible for some of the worst atrocities of the Horus Heresy. It was the Alpha Legion who corrupted the Raven Guard's gene seed, turning their new recruits into mutant bird monsters. Which doesn't really make sense because they're just called the Raven Guard. They don't have bird DNA, but whatever. I'm not an expert in bird lore. So, were the Alpha Legion working for the Cabal? Apparently. Omegon had, get this, a little alien buddy who looked like a 7-fingered hand and who acted as his liaison with the Cabal. I worked with a team of artists on a rendering of what this creature would look like. That's on screen right now. That's I'd spent a lot of money and time on creating this rendering. So this grotesque freak told them about the Raven Guard trying to use advanced gene seed technology to rapidly replenish their numbers after they're decimated on Isfahan 5. But every time they do some awful war crime, there's this hint that they're playing a bigger game. After the Raven Guard operation, for instance, they were supposed to hand over research data on Corvus Corax's DNA to future episode being about guy, Fabius Bile. But they only gave him partial data. Oh, and Omegon also threw his little hand buddy out the airlock. Then there was the Battle of Chondax, which wasn't supposed to be a battle at all. Horus sent Alpharius to recruit Jagatai Khan and his White Scars Legion to a traitor cause, and he probably could have done it. The Great Khan was kind of always a rebel, even before the heresy. He preferred the culture of his homeworld to the Imperium. Instead, the Alpha Legion went to the Chondax system, where the White Scars were mopping up the last of the Orcs from the Battle of Ullanor, and he used this alien warp thingy, similar to the Cadian pylons, to prevent the White Scars from going to warp space or using astropathic communication. They were basically stuck radio silent. The huge Alpha Legion fleet didn't attack them, however. And when they did finally fire on the White Scars, they didn't strike killing blows. It was kind of like they weren't even trying. Then, Omegon destroyed the pylons, and the White Scars were free to go to warp and receive a message from Rogel Dawn that Horus had turned traitor. The White Scars were now completely loyalist. Great job, Alpharius. Only, yeah, great job, Alpharius, because he and his brother clearly wanted the White Scars to join the loyalists. They attacked the White Scars when they were supposed to be doing a parley with them and destroyed the pylons the second before Rogal Dorn sent his message. The Emperor's Praetorian and absolute no-chill haver Rogal Dorn is going to come up a lot here. So, unlike the other legions, the Alpha Legion make extensive use of human agents. They're sparatoi, or sown men. The Alpha Legion draw heavily from Greek mythology and imagery in the same way that the Ultramarines draw from Roman mythology and the Space Wolves from the Norse. In Greek mythology, the sparatoi were warriors who grew from dragon teeth planted in the ground, the kind of first real instance in fiction of artificial soldiers like the Space Marines. While most of the Alpha Legion's sparatoi are human, there are many who are augmented, not to the point of being full Astartes, but definitely above ordinary humans. And we don't know whether that's like cybernetic enhancements, genetic stuff. They also used a lot of aliens. They didn't during the Heresy, but nowadays you'll find Kroots, Frel, all kinds of weird stuff in their ranks. Now, the Alpha Legion had been seeding these sparatoi throughout the Imperium for decades. So when it came time to rise up and take strategically important worlds like Pluto, they had thousands of trained assassins and saboteurs ready. Now, in typical Alpha Legion style, they didn't make their missions simple. The sparatoi were given multiple, often contradictory orders. They might be told, you must terminate Imperial General Chocula Frankenberry with extreme prejudice, but also, Imperial Army General Chocula Frankenberry is vital to our plans and must survive at any cost. Then, when they were in the field, they would get a code word that would determine which of their orders they would actually carry out. They would see a piece of graffiti or get handed a single piece of paper with a code word. So this is kind of genius. Like, if an individual sparatoi was captured before they got their mission, the interrogators wouldn't know whether the Alpha Legion wanted to kill or save General Chocula Frankenberry. And they would have far more than just 2 orders. Now, remember this code words bit because it comes up later. These sparatoi even got into the Emperor's own palace. Of all the things they could have done there, they had a very specific mission. Head into a hall in which there were statues of all 20 Primarchs, and destroy every statue except those of Alpharius and Rogal Dorn. This was Alpharius' way of calling Dorn out, and it really got under his skin. Dorn was personally in charge of the defense of the Sol system, and he had allowed Alpharius' spies to plant explosives inside the palace. Dorn was so ashamed that he refused to let the Custodes or Malcador see the statuary. Alpharius had managed to get his city-sized flagship, the Alpha, into the solar system by putting its entire crew into stasis and turning off all its systems, just letting it drift past Dorn's defences. Once he was inside the perimeter, Alpharius went for the astropathic relay on Pluto's moon of, predictably, Hydra. This, also predictably, was misdirection. Alpharius really wanted a one-on-one with Dorn to recruit him. We think. Alpharius' opening gambit was to slaughter Dorn's Huskarls, his personal guard, and their leader, Arcamus, before dueling Dorn himself. Here's what went down. "I did this so you would understand," shouted Alpharius. "So you would see that you cannot win. I'm not here to kill you, brother. I'm not here for Horus. I'm here to give you victory." Dorn was astride in front of Archimarchus, blood bright and scattering as he wrenched free of Alpharius' spear. The Huskarls fell, their legs cut out from beneath them as Alpharius spun wide, spear arcing low like a scythe through long grass. And now Dorn stood alone, blood running down the gold of his armour. "I know the enemy," said Alpharius. "I know your weakness and theirs. I know the truth." Dorn stepped forwards, Storm's teeth slamming down, battering into the spear blade in a blaze of light. Alpharius slipped to the side, and Dorn turned the direction of his cut as it fell. But Alpharius was not where his movement should have taken him. He was behind Dorn's cut, the blade of his spear slicing down. "I can give you victory, brother," Alpharius urged him again. Dorn swayed aside, and the spear blade skimmed his chest. Slivers of gold and silver feathers fell to the deck, Alpharius was overextended, and Dawn was turning, his strength flowing into a wide lateral cut that would never land. It would never land because in the instant that Archimarchus saw that what was about to happen, Alpharius was not overextended. He was exactly where he needed to be to turn past Dawn's blow and make another last perfect thrust with his spear. Archimarchus felt his blood-drained body try to move faster, try to push itself across the few meters separating him from the Lord, whose life and service were the reason he did not fear. Dawn cut, Storm's teeth blurred. Alpharius swayed back, pivoting and sliding a hair's breadth past the screaming edge. Archimarchus lunged to his lord's side, his seax blade reaching for the spear thrust even as it unfolded. His blade caught the haft of Alpharius' spear, and the force of the connection kicked through his metal arm like the kiss of a lightning bolt. Archimarchus reeled back, staggering to the deck, and the spear struck home. It rammed through Dawn's armour and into the flesh, and stopped. Dawn stood unmoved, the spear embedded in his shoulder where he had stepped in to take the blow. His left hand was locked around the spear's haft. For an instant the two Primarchs were arm's reach apart, eye to eye. "Brother," Alpharius began, and Dawn hacked Storm's teeth through Alpharius' arms above the wrists. Alpharius is totally, comprehensively killed, and Omegon feels it. There is, of course, some speculation about whether the Alpharius Dawn fought was really Omegon, or another lesser legionnaire given a sip of the real Alpharius' blood to be able to mimic him. When you read through the book Praetorian of Dawn and the books that come after it, it's pretty clear as anything could be with the Alpha Legion, that it was the real Alpharius and he really is dead. Killed because he thought that other people cared how smart he was. Remember that part earlier about code words? That's going to come up again, because in addition to having spies inside the Imperial Palace, the Legion had hidden 3,000 Marines in the Emperor's basement. These legionnaires were in stasis. They were probably placed there long before the heresy had even begun, when Alpharius and Omegon knew that Horus would have betrayed the Emperor even before Horus did. Their goal was to make sure that the Alpha Legion would be on the winning side no matter what. So they were hypno-coded to respond to certain code words, each corresponding to a particular plan. If they heard Sagittary when they woke up, they would fight for Horus. If they heard Orpheus, they would try to destroy Chaos itself. Paramus meant mutual annihilation. Alpha Legion operative Ingo Peck was tasked with delivering the code word Xenophon, which would mean that the Alpha Legion would side with the Emperor. So, were they loyal? There's some fuckery involving John Grammaticus and a witch that prevents the code word from being used. But the fact that the Alpha Legion wanted to use it surely means that at least at this point they were loyal, right? One of the most enduring theories about the Alpha Legion's actions during the heresy is that Alpharius was the traitor twin and Omegon the loyalist. So possibly both were really loyalist or working towards their own plan, as we'll get to later. But Alpharius had to play the part of traitor while his brother undid his plans. They had to work separately to keep up the ruse, but ultimately they had the same goal. Omegon probably died sometime after the heresy, killed by Rabuta Guilliman on the planet of Escrador. This only comes from fluff in various codexes, so I'm taking it with kind of a grain of salt. I'm not going into narrative theory or anything here, but I tend to take what's written in Black Library books to be the truth of the event, as if there was a camera in the room, while the fluff in the codexes reads more like Imperial propaganda and is therefore up for questioning. There's been a lot of sightings of Omegon, who's now going by Alpharius, since his death. Hell, there's even been a lot of deaths of Alpharius since his death. After Escrador, the Legion split into independent warbands and headed towards the galactic east. Not, you should note, the Eye of Terror, where the other legions wasted their strength fighting each other. This means that the Alpha Legion is now one of the biggest Space Marine chapters, though nobody knows quite how big given how many of them operate underground. and they have a stable supply of untainted gene seed. There's even probably some of them working on making Primaris Marines. Mike Brooks' novel Renegades Harrowmaster shows that they have everything they need to do so. Brooks also wrote a short story that gives some insight into their recruitment methods. They recruit only the best and brightest from the Imperium's top schools, turning the kids who go on to become commissars and planetary governors against them. Compare this to how the Night Lords recruit. In Red Tithe, we see them descend on a prison planet where they tell the inmates to kill each other until only the strongest and meanest are left. By the 41st millennium, any trace of Omegon's loyalty is more kind of gone. The tiny warband in the book Shroud of Night aren't typical Chaos Space Marines, but they're firmly against the Corpse Emperor. They work against the Emperor's children, the World Eaters, with Khan the Betrayer busting through walls like the Kool-Aid Man. Several of them use demon weapons, and one is straight up trying to persuade the rest of their Harrow to turn their souls over to the Dark Gods in exchange for a little extra juice. They fight through Astra Militarum, Sororitas, the Admech, and the new Primaris Marines of the Imperial Fists to reach and corrupt a beacon, like a kind of mini Astronomicon, a psychic lighthouse that guides ships in the half of the galaxy that's cut off from the Emperor's light. Only it doesn't work to call them traitors exactly, because, spoilers, at the end of the book, a literal angel, one of the Emperor's own saints, tells them to escape with the beacon, who turns out to be a young boy. So the actual dead-as-fuck Emperor had plans that involved the Alpha Legion. Or there's the Redacted. Firstly, awesome name. Second, their senior commanders were corrupted Marines from other Loyalist and traitor chapters. There was a Mentor, a Relictor, a Fallen Dark Angel, even a Night Lord, or as he's now known, a Nice Lord. And they're in straight up open warfare against the Ultramarines and their successors. So they've got to be traitors, right? Well, no, because the reason that they fight is to weed out the weakness in the Imperium. They fully see themselves as loyalists. Unconventional loyalists, but still loyalists. The only Alpha Legion warband that we know for sure are fully and totally against the Imperium is the Ghost Legion, a coalition of warbands fighting under Harrowmaster Solomon Akura. Akura is the current owner of Alpharis' spear. He has a human Psyker waifu, a giant Space Hulk base, and he took down a whole Death Watch team single-handed. He's got more chance than anyone of making the Alpha Legion a major threat again, but it's equally possible that, like Alpharius, he's overestimated his own intelligence and how much that matters in a galaxy this bad. It's also very possible that he'll piss off the wrong people, or who don't want Akura's string of planetary conquests to bring too much heat down on them. And there's always the chance that Omegon is out there somewhere. If we ever get a book detailing what happened on Escador, we'll know for sure. But maybe we're thinking in too binary a manner here. After all, the Hydra has 3 heads. It might not be as simple as traitor and loyalist, with nothing in between or outside. During the Heresy, Alpharius said that war is simply the galaxy's hygiene. It's a reference to Filippo Marinetti's quote, "We will glorify war, the world's only hygiene," from the Futurist Manifesto. If the Imperium is rotting from within, then maybe hygiene is what it needs. It could be that a little violence, applied selectively, could strengthen the Imperium. Say one small warband attacks an Imperial world. That world doubles its defences, and then when the Black Legion turn up, they're strong enough to fight back. That's likely to be a temporary solution to extend the Imperium's life to the point where, maybe, Omegon or Alpharius returns. Even 10,000 years later, the various loyal and traitor legions are still extensions of their Primarchs, and the uber-disciplined and cohesive Alpha Legion more so than any other. Alpharius and Omegon are, above anything else, very smart and very aware that they are very smart. If somebody told them that they had only 2 options, both bad, they would absolutely find or make a third path. The Hydra has 3 heads, remember? Maybe, and with these guys it's always a maybe, they found a third path in which humanity could live. It obviously wouldn't be easy or quick, and based on what happened at the end of the Horus Heresy, those 3,000 legionnaires fighting on the Emperor's side were a part of it. And even if the heresy didn't go the way they hoped, they, or rather Omegon, would have another plan in place. His death on Esquirel seems a little too simple. Right after his brother died from underestimating one of his brother Primarchs, Omegon's just going to do the same thing? Doesn't seem likely. So does this mean that the Alpha Legion are the good guys? Maybe instead of being for the Emperor or for Chaos, they're for humanity. After all, of all the Primarchs, Alpharius and Omegon are easily the most human, and they have respect for baseline humans that pretty much every Primarch and Marine lacks. It would be tempting to see them this way, but I want to resist that particular reading. 40k has a few okay people, but it doesn't have good organisations. It's too mired in that kind of crust punk rejection of all authority for any one groups to not be utterly compromised. And we all remember what happened the one and only time that they tried to have a hero faction. No, I think they're more interesting as a legion that's neither loyal or traitor, but a mysterious third thing. And in this regard, they're kind of horribly underused. Balancing order as embodied by the Imperium and chaos as embodied by chaos, in a kind of more Cockian way, is a story we haven't seen, and it's a challenge that makes for interesting narratives. There are legionnaires like Akura who embody the Alpharius-like tendency to throw the Imperium into chaos, and there are legionnaires in the Shroud of Night who, even though they don't know it, are working to bring balance back to the full half of the Imperium that's pretty much lost to chaos at this point. Or at least that's what they would be doing if the Black Library could get around to making a very long-awaited sequel. The Alpha Legion are never going to be good guys, it's not in their nature. But they can be extremely interesting assholes. The kind of magnificent bastards we love, like Tony Soprano or Don Draper or Daniel Plainview. They just need a little investing in from Games Workshop. Some big story arcs, some unique miniatures. Maybe something that draws together all the threads from Harrowmaster, Shroud of Night, and further back into the Heresy. There's dozens of factions and sub-factions out there, so it's hard to make the case for any one faction to be raised up, when that would mean others have to step out of the limelight. But what happened during the Heresy and what that can mean is so fascinating that I think there's a case that the Alpha Legion should get the attention that they deserve. So, not to be a sound off in the comments guy, but sound the absolute fuck off in the comments if you agree. Also, I referenced an unusual number of US food mascots in this episode that I really have no business in knowing about. Weird.